The date, June 5th, 1944. The United Forces are preparing for their final assault on the Normandy coast. The mission, establish a beachhead, break through the front lines, and infiltrate and destroy enemy headquarters. This is Iron Tank, Invasion of Normandy. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
And today, if it wasn't clear, we are in the trenches.
That's World War One, Mike. Come on.
Oh, there were no trenches in World War II?
I'm sure, but it wasn't iconic.
What do the tanks go in? If not, I know they don't go in the trenches, so I'm saying, like, what would be the tank equivalent?
Fields?
They go into the fields, okay?
The tank equivalent
We'll
of
fight on the
trenches,
beaches.
yeah.
We'll feed on the fields. We'll feed on the little children.
Gotcha. Okay, and that's a lot, Sean, all at once. For those of you that don't know, we are playing Iron Tank Invasion of Normandy. It's an SNK game. I'm going to give you a brief overview here for a second. I described this as a top-view action shooting game where you control a tank starting on the beaches of Normandy, then advancing forward while fighting various enemies. You can also rescue prisoners of war. What do you guys think?
Sounds
so far adds
interesting.
up.
Right. I did leave out a important thing, but we'll talk about that in the gameplay section. For those of you that care about the deep lore of this, it's just history. So you don't have, there's no like
questionable merit.
Yeah. The way that like the 8-year-old who's playing it might think it went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you're storming from the Normandy River into like the forest of Normandy,
Right. Eventually into Berlin itself.
Well, I never knew that there was just one single tank.
Right,
invading
just one
Normandy.
Guy, his name is Paul, codenamed.
That's the tank's name.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, there's no one
That's
in there.
funny. And it's codenamed Snake.
Yeah.
You guys catch
Threw
that?
me off
did.
a little bit too. I was like, wait, is this related to Metal Gear?
Well,
but
yeah,
like
because
historically,
there are the
involved?
transmissions.
The tank is the first Metal Gear.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I like
Yeah.
that theory. SNK and Konami have nothing to do with each other. I just thought it was funny that we got a game where the titular character is also the titular character. I don't know why.
You are correct.
Yeah. Is also Snake. But not solid or liquid.
I thought you were going to say his name
I
is
guess
Tank.
it is the titular character because the Iron Tank is the
Yeah.
character. I don't know.
Iron Tank is the character?
Well, the tank is what's codenamed Snake, right?
Right. Well,
So,
yeah.
I mean, I guess it's not a character, but
I also like Iron Snake as like a, because there was Liquid Snake, Solid Snake. This
Oh.
is Iron Snake.
Helium
this is
Snake.
in the Metal Gear universe. But one thing that we should note is that if you play the Japanese version, inside the tank is Colonel Ralph, who also appeared in Akari Warriors 1. So they are making this like shared universe.
Was he one of the Akari
Yeah,
Warriors?
he was one of the Akari Warriors.
Okay.
Yeah, so he just like does all these things all the time, only with one or two people.
I just figure that, like, with a name like Akari, it would be like a more Japanese equivalent,
Right, and if you'll remember, Akari Warriors had a tank as well.
Yeah.
So this is basically like an updated Akari Warriors 1.
Yeah, it's like a spin-off.
Yeah. But made by the same people, so I think
Yeah.
it's like,
yeah, they
what
just
if we
realized people
took
like the
tank
tanks
thing
and they
made its own game.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Did you come across that thought at all when you were playing Akari Warriors? Like, oh, I'd love to just play a game where I just be the tank.
I think we talked about it, didn't we, on the episode?
Probably.
I don't remember that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just a good bet for me. I don't remember that either. I'm just guessing.
Episode
we
like
did.
34, 44, one of those fours.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah. So let's get into the gameplay here, okay? I think we need to talk about the most important thing, which is controlling your tank.
Yes.
Sounds simple, right? You move around on the D-pad, you shoot. You got two different types of ammo. You've got your normal like ammunition, and then you have your what they refer to as your main weapon, but that can be changed. However, there's a twist to this whole controlling the tank mechanic, right, Joe?
There is, and it has to do with the turret, the gun on the tank. Usually, I mean, I'm thinking of more modern controllers where you have more options of buttons to press to turn the turret. So obviously we don't have that, so they came up with this questionable solution of how you turn the turret, where you turn your tank with your normal D-pad, but if you're pressing B, which is also the shoot button while you're pressing the D-pad, you turn the turret, which I found wildly confusing.
This was, as soon as I saw this game on the docket for like a future episode, and I was looking at a couple screenshots. I realized that they were either going to do two things. They were going to be a tank that only shoots forward, which ruins the idea of playing as a tank. Like, that's kind of what tanks do. Or they were going to do some weird hack to make the controls work for it and still be able to control your treads and your turret differently. And they went with the second option, which I think is the better option, but like I knew it was going to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, because then you have to like, you can't move while you're turning the turret, and then a lot of times you're just trying to shoot and then move, and then you turn the turret. Like, it's just it's frustrating.
Yeah, I think that the real problem with that formula comes down to when you account for how many enemies and how often enemies appear on screen. That it would be one thing to have that approach where the turret moves on its own and you have to, do a different input for that if you had time to be more strategic about this kind of thing. However, enemies appear straight on from the left and right, different types of enemies too. You have foot soldiers, you have other tanks, and those things all matter differently on the screen. So you have to kind of just know where your turret is at all times and be fast with your control over it.
And that's sort of like they kept the pace of a typical run and gun where you have like marginally more snappy controls, but they completely slowed down your movement with this tank. And I don't think it's a complete failure. I think that it at least provides a challenge.
And to go back to the pacing there, don't you think a game where you position yourself in a tank should be more about like, strategic, like tank on tank or tank on, like a lot of people, not the traditional run and gun sense, it seems weird to be this tank that just steamrolls everything, but also is not actually, it's not actually doing that because you're constantly getting attacked as well.
Right.
In what games do you remember playing with a tank? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I would try to think about that because the only time I've ever thought of like a tank would be Grand Theft Auto.
Okay, so
and that's not realistic at all.
There's the Grand Theft Auto tank. There's the Halo tank, which is still pretty loose and like you don't really have to think all that strategically with that. But then on the other end, which is what I think what you're thinking of more, there's like the Battle Zone tank, which is a completely like almost not turn based, but it is very tactics based. So I think that you could go either way. I think that because they made the tank so slow in both like the turret movement and your own movement, that we are sort of coming with this challenge issue.
Right. Yeah. I don't have anything further to say on that. I think it's a learning curve that maybe with like hours of practice you could like overcome. I just don't. For me, it wasn't hitting.
Mm-hmm. Same.
And I think it was more because of the barrage of enemies than it was the failure of the turret control.
Right. I was just going to say that. I think the failure of the turret control definitely affected me a lot, but also combining that with just how much gunfire could be on the screen at once that you have to avoid and how slow you go to avoid it. It just seemed even right out of the gate a little like just overly challenging for like the first level, and then I can only imagine like by like the last level.
Though the first level was actually kind of easy.
Well, maybe I'm thinking of a little later then, but I remember there being several times where there's just like fire everywhere. And I'm like, where could I even have gone? I mean, maybe it was shortly after that.
I think unless you're good at these games, you're going to die the first time you play that first level, but that's more of a, learnings and takeaways thing, which we'll get into because there are elements to...
And when I said that it was easy, I mean in comparison to like everything after it.
Right,
like,
sure.
It's still challenging.
Yeah, it's still challenging. I will also add that I wouldn't have wanted the tank to shoot straight on, so I don't disagree with their choice here. I disagree with how they place the enemies. Shooting straight on would have just turned this into a shmup.
Yeah,
a shmup with a tank instead of a plane or a helicopter or the various other space weapons we've seen.
I'll also note that like it seems that their design sort of continuing off of that. There are moments where you will trigger a complete ambush, and because your turret moves so slowly, it's impossible to get everybody before they pretty much kill you unless you have a certain power-up, which I think is just bad that's just bad design in itself. But we'll get into that when we get into power.
Right, you can't necessarily like run away from
Yeah.
combat because of the way that the scrolling is designed. You can kind of push, you can go up to the top of the screen and
Yeah.
push it forward, but only ever so slowly, and that's just going to cause you to get into the line of fire with everyone.
And in the specific moment that I'm talking about, you can't move forward past like a wall until you kill these 3 tanks that have surrounded you.
Oh, I see what you're doing
Yeah.
about, like what I would call the bosses
Right.
of each level at the end.
Yeah.
But even though there's no
I mean,
levels
it's
per se.
It's not so much a boss as it is just like a choke point.
Gotcha. Okay. And you talked about those different power ups. They are rapid fire, armor pierce, bombshells, and long range. I almost, knowing that this is SNK, I kind of hoped for some more ridiculous style power ups for a tank. But I get that this is going for that World War II thing, and there weren't power ups on tanks to begin with, so might as well just try to like keep it to like yeah, right. So these are fine. They just kind of seem uninspired at this point.
And did you include the question mark, like kill the whole screen one in there?
I did not include that because when I'm talking about these ones, I'm referring to the ones that you have to select
Yes.
to go to the menu and then choose from which.
You have
type
to
of
do that with
ammunition.
the kill
Oh,
the whole
really?
screen ones
Okay.
too,
You just
yeah.
can't combine it with any other
So
one.
that is another. Well, yeah. The moment that I was talking about where you cannot get past it unless you have this power up is that kill the whole screen or you will die.
And that's confirmed. Like,
I mean, at least if you have
to the average player.
to the average player, you're gonna die unless you do that.
Right.
But that is a thing that we haven't really talked about yet is that you can combine these power ups, and while there isn't too much variety in what they are, you can at least create different variations of them.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting way that we haven't seen power-ups used before. Not only combining them, but that also that you have this like bar of like how much of that power-up you have left, and you can kind of decide, well, I'll put this and this together for these enemies, and this together for those enemies. Personally, I didn't find that there was like too many reasons for me to put like just 2 together and not all of them, but other than conserving some of them, but it's a cool concept.
Yeah, and you pick up these power-ups fairly regularly, which I thought was nice. And the other aspect of your tank management is the damage control, because there's collision between foot soldiers and tanks, and the difference, of course, being that running over soldiers will actually act as health, whereas running over tanks will obliterate like a good chunk of your health,
Yeah.
which totally makes sense. I'm not sure where the health thing. No, I meant like that the tank shouldn't reward you either, because then the whole game would just be mowing down everything rather than shooting it.
I did appreciate that you could just run over everybody, though. Like, I mean, I know that you shouldn't because they will drop ammunition if you shoot them for the normal way, but it was still satisfying.
Yeah, I didn't expect them to let you do that, even
Yeah.
though like you're in a tank and they're not. So you would think it would, but
You would
I
expect
feel like we
them to
haven't
just
seen that
take
yet.
damage from you at the very least. To gain damage from that adds a whole new
Right.
strategic component to it,
Oh,
because
right,
you're right.
right.
You have to kind of trade off power-ups and ammunition versus the health that you might desperately need at that point.
Yeah.
Especially as you go later on, there's more frequent tanks and other enemies as opposed to these soldiers. So the soldiers, when they appear, you more likely want to run them over just to make sure you get some of your health back. Just assuming you're not great at health like me. I wasn't great at my health management.
One thing I've noticed was that if you pick up any kind of ammunition, you do get a bit of energy back. So does it just that if you run them over without it, it gives you more? I was usually shooting them before I ran them
Interesting. Okay. I guess I only knew based off the manual that the running over the soldiers gave you health. So I was assuming that I was only paying attention while I was collecting the soldiers to confirm that.
That is a really disgusting thought, though, that, just the blood of your enemies coating your
it's
metal
really,
hull.
Right. Well, that's Iron Snake for you.
What's his actual name? Jeff?
It's Paul.
Paul.
in the other one it was in the other version, Japanese root.
Oh, it was Ralph.
Ralph.
R-A-L-F. The non-typical way of spelling it. Yeah, so I mean, you have this damage control thing. You have the ability to control your weapon layout for your tank, and then there's this choose your path component of the game that we haven't talked about yet. That I think is really cool because there's also a map you refer to in your menu that lets you constantly check, how close you are to Berlin.
And I will say that I think that this is to scale. Because I was playing for a while, and when I checked the map like periodically, I barely moved, and so this has to be one of the biggest game worlds in a game like this that I've seen.
I think at the very least you have to go through something like 11 levels at the shortest path. And what they've chose to do is that on the ones that are shorter paths, they've made the levels themselves harder.
Yeah.
So it actually, works out in your favor to take a longer route if you're struggling with the game because you won't come across those more difficult levels, whereas the ones that might jump you or zip you across the screen from, say, like stage 5 to 9 instead of going like 5, 6, 8, I
didn't realize that's a cool little like risk reward sort of like choose your own difficulty almost.
Yeah. And you're never locked to it's not so much like Star Fox, the way people might be thinking about that, where you get the map layout at the beginning and you choose which planet you want to go to. It doesn't work like that because that Star Fox locks you into that path after you've chosen it at the beginning. This is more like you can choose to zip ahead and do a hard level now, but at the end of that level, there still might be, not all the time, 2 or 3 diverging paths you can choose from afterwards that, if you really thought about it, you might take one that looked like it was not going to get you as far because you might get a chance to take it a little easier or something like that.
They all like... The easiest difficulty though is hard. Just don't forget that. Though.
Yes, no, yeah. It's still an NES game, so that's worth mentioning. I don't really know what the solve here for this kind of game is because of how difficult it was for me. I don't even want to say I made it to the halfway point in this game.
I didn't either.
So I don't know if that's just give us more health. I don't know if that would,
I think it also might be
the enemies.
Yeah, managing like not even all the time. There's a lot of times where it's not so bad, but like managing the enemy fire on the screen. I don't know if I know I keep saying this. Did you guys experience this where like sometimes you were just like I don't even know where I could have gone in that situation. I was at somewhere too late to, the enemies fire on me. It's too late for me to kind of get out of the way. And there's it's too dense.
Right. And it's so dense that slowdown's not even helpful because you're at that point, sometimes in NES games when there's too many sprites on screen, it slows down and you almost feel like you're in slow motion and able to do cooler things. But this is not the case here because you realize more or less that you're actually trapped. And one of those bullets, or maybe multiple, are going to hit you.
Yeah, there are times I feel like if you could just freeze frame, you could find moments where you're like, there's no way out of this situation.
Yep, that's me.
That's right. You're probably wondering.
So there weren't bosses at the end of the stage per se, but there was a clear thing that you had to accomplish before you could move on to the diverging paths.
There are some boss-like enemies.
There are some boss-like enemies. There's right away, I think in that first level, the think tank, I think it's called, which is the big tank. Yeah. But they call it the think tank in the manual. There's also a giant submarine. There's the fighter planes that go by. Those trains. We didn't even talk about the armored trains that Berlin had. Is that true? Was that in actual history?
They did have a big train gun, but I don't know if that's an armored train.
No, I meant that was a thing though. They had as part of their railroad system,
they just
armored military train system.
Yeah, just as a patrol, they would send trains down all of their train tracks at 80 miles an hour and just hit anything they could. That was how they did it.
Right, that makes sense. I get it.
You could see that on the History Channel.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought about this game in terms of its historical accuracy, but now I see very clearly. I mean, I didn't make it to the end, so I don't know what to say about the ending of this game, but it seems like you fight a just bigger think tank. Yeah. The biggest one. He looks gigantic. It might as well be Metal Gear, right?
It is Metal Gear.
It's the Metal Gear of 1944.
True.
Yeah. They'd never gone to
no, they never
World War II in Metal Gear Solid.
No.
Do you think they will?
Well, Only if there's like a crab. Like if you get to fight a crab.
Oh, a giant enemy crab?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So it could be historically accurate.
Yeah.
So you have this. You have the choosing your path. You have the main gun options where you can build out your loadout. You have the damage control of health versus risk. That's a lot of strategy in one game. Do you think that they all complement each other? That they're all just there as additional choices on top of each other? Is it too many things to manage?
I think it's too much to manage. I think that if some things were tweaked, then it could be a complementary experience. But and it's not even that like in these earlier NES games that we played, like, oh, there's too many enemies. They don't even care where they put them. It's just like they're randomly spawning and running at you. Like, no, these are placed enemies. Mm-hmm. But I think they just got a little too like slap happy with it.
Yeah.
When they were coding it.
Right. Because I think the coolest idea in this game is the ability to combine your power-ups and manage those that way. And I really wish that they had planned out the levels in a way where it's like, I mean, maybe they did and I just didn't like pick up on some of it, but it didn't really feel like there was ever a need for me to like experiment too much with like, what does this do and that do? And I know we touched on that earlier. And we've said like some good things about this game and some bad things, but like I want to say like, I didn't really have fun with this game. And I think that not to spoil my thing, but like, I think that really kind of speaks to the fact that like, there's cool things that we're talking about in this game, but don't feel like they're meshing well together.
I totally think that games can have cool features and still suck.
Yeah,
you know?
Totally.
Like, not that I'm saying this game sucks, but you know that remains to be seen. Also, speaking to the historical accuracy, maybe this is like a thing you're not supposed to win. Like no one man could ever take down the German
war
army,
is hell.
You know?
Does it say German?
Well, you're going to Berlin.
Well, I mean, you're the United Forces. Like,
Oh, gotcha.
doesn't
Okay,
exist.
That's true.
I think this is an alternate.
Yeah,
history.
This is an alternate history where Normandy is actually
the country of Normandy.
No, yeah, they're a country and they are the ones starting the war, so you have to just fight them. I guess I never thought about it in that context though. If you were going into a war zone by yourself, you would be barraged by enemies. They would totally take advantage of that.
It's actually a deconstruction of every other running gun game I've ever played.
That was very funny. Also, real fast, thinking about 1917 for a minute. I mean, this is like an adaptation of that.
Yeah.
Except it's different.
No, 1917 is an adaptation of Invasion of Normandy, just without the tank.
Okay, right,
yes.
yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, on very loose terms.
Right.
I know I said earlier that this is like Ikari Warriors 1, but did you guys know that this is actually based on SNK's 1985 arcade game, TNK 3?
Tink 3.
Tank 3.
Tink 3.
Yeah, T.N.K, and I don't think the TNK stands for anything.
Totally.
But I think it's funny that a company like
numerous
SNK would make a TNK
Right.
game.
Because the next
that's
letter
what
of the
comes
alphabet.
next. Yeah. I'm on the edge of my seat waiting for the prequel, RNK. Because that's funny as well.
Right. These are all fun. Everything we're saying is funny.
I'll link Tank 3 in the show notes this week. You guys can see what that game played like. But if you watch it, you'll definitely see right away how this is almost like a sequel, but not called TNK 4.
The squeak.
You know, it's a squeakquel. Others, though, believe that this game is based on guerrilla warfare. Another
the concept.
another SNK game. Actually, just called Guerrilla War. I sasaid Guerrilla Warfare.
Like Guerrilla War?
Guerrilla War. I'm serious. And you know what the worst part is? It doesn't have gorillas in it. So it's another World War II game. It came out the year before, so I'm not like sold on the idea that it could be influencing that fast. I think TNK 3 being like further away means that this is just like the natural lineage of things. But Guerrilla War comes to the NES in 1989, so couldn't have possibly influenced it in our minds because we haven't played it yet. But we will, along with many other SNK games.
Can't wait.
Yeah, SNK, they're all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But this is why when you play like Capcom versus SNK on...
Can you pick a tank?
You can't pick a tank, but you play on like, you know, let's say GameCube, right? Like I think it existed. Capcom versus SNK 2
SNK.
was on GameCube. you would know the whole Capcom roster. It's, it's like, wow, look at that. Ryu, Mega Man, Simon, like that's, maybe Simon. No,
Captain
Simon's
Commando.
Konami. Captain Commando is in some Capcom related fighting games, I think.
Okay.
He's in Project X Commando for sure, but
Interesting.
Anyway, my point was when you look at the SNK side, you might not recognize any of those characters unless you grew up with these games.
I remember when I would play those games in the arcade, I never knew what any of them were except for the couple like Street Fighter guys that were in there.
Yeah, I think none of them are like have reached a level of like iconic or anything. They're just like, oh, this. Yeah, who are they?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. And I got nothing else, so does anybody have any straight thoughts before we move into the essential games list?
Well, Mike, you didn't let us respond to your request for stray thoughts.
I was kind of hoping we could get out of this one early.
All right. Well, I just wanted to stop and ask you guys. It's not so much like a stray thought, but
Straight question.
It's a straight question. Like I know that we touched upon the existence of the radio, but do you guys have any thoughts on the radio? Like I thought that it was completely it didn't help with anything. It was just giving us very vague. Sort of like, there might be something happening up ahead of you.
It mostly tells you about either things that are happening or potential locations of prisoners of war.
But it never says, where.
No, it never says
I
where.
stopped checking it after a while.
And on top of that, the annoying thing is that the prisoners of war who do talk other than saying thanks, the ones who say stuff, just say stuff that you can learn in the manual.
Yeah.
They don't give hints about take this path.
Like any progression or anything that's...
Right, like make sure you go right. I heard that there's less enemies, that would be cool.
And I know that you said you ignored it, but I had to respond because I cannot take that.
Yeah, it is an annoying
noise.
beeping.
Yeah.
It's only it only beeps for as long as you're in that area, though, so it's not too bad.
I also just thought it was funny that we're named Snake and we have the radio now again, and it just felt very similar to Metal Gear.
Yeah, but you can't tune it.
No,
You don't
yeah,
get to-
really, yeah,
yeah.
and that's what I'm kind of in it for. Is like if I can't tune the radio, I don't want to play the game.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sean, if you don't mind, would you give your vote first?
My vote for what, Mike?
The essential games list?
Oh, okay. Do you want to play the music again, or do you want to?
No, I think you know what? Let's do it.
Okay, I feel much better now. While again, there are a lot of things about this game that I like. I think that I'm not much of a run and gun guy, but I appreciate that there's some tweaks to the formula happening. Again, not the best execution, but I did have fun with this game after I got a hold of the wacky tank controls. But again, like this, it's too much of a shit show most of the time for me to say that this is a recommended game let alone say it's an essential game. So I will say no.
All right, that's one no. Joe?
Yeah, similar thing. I mean, I kind of already spoiled it earlier, but I didn't have a lot of fun with the game. I thought it had some good concepts, but overall, they didn't come together in a way that did anything for me that I can't get elsewhere. I mean, there are even other games I didn't care for that I probably like better than this one. So yeah, I'm going to give it a no.
Okay. I'm not really sure what this game needed to make it essential because it hit a lot of interesting concepts that we haven't even seen before. I think that choosing your own path thing is pretty revolutionary, and we praise something like Mega Man, which did it differently, but more or less this is another way of executing that same kind of issue. So I think that all those things that it adds to NES games that we've never seen before are awesome ideas. It's all about implementation for a game like Iron Tank. I don't even know if maybe this game needed a larger field of view, and this way there was more opportunities for you to think about placement of your tank. Most of the time you just had to be somewhere in the center of the screen to make sure you could round out bullet attacks and stuff like that. I don't know if it was as simple as my suggestion early on in the episode of just removing the amount of enemies. Maybe that would have came off as boring or just eventually, as you continue, because it's a massive game, it just get dry after a while of just seeing the same kind of things happen over and over again. So maybe you do need that barrage. Or maybe this is the lesson that no one man can take down a country, it takes a nation.
It takes a village.
It takes nations. So yeah, it's not getting an essential games list for me, but SNK continues to show that they might produce something worthy of the essential games list down the line. They're growing, and I can't say that they'll continue to grow, but their games are definitely getting more sophisticated than where we started, which for reference, I'm pretty sure was Athena.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way from Athena.
On the Heat Seekers charts, SNK, moving on up.
And that's about all the time we have for this episode of Nostalgia. Next week, we'll be playing Legendary Wings, a game I swear I've never heard anybody drop to me before. No one said on no one's name dropped that. No one said on like a forum even like, check out these pickups of like games I recently found at a garage sale, and Legendary Wings isn't even in the boxes. I don't see this thing anywhere. Even the box art, like seeing that for the first time, I was like, what is this? So if you've played this before, I want you to write into us on NostalgiaCast, at NostalgiaCast. That's our Twitter. And just let me know like how you found this game growing up, because I feel like no one heard of it, even though it's a Capcom game. So that's kind of interesting. We'll definitely get into all that. Sean, will you have a good week until next week?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So. Joe?
Absolutely.
All right, and we want all of our listeners to have a great week too. And if sometime this week you happen to say NostalgiaCast is a podcast you should listen to, know that you should have said Nostalgia is a podcast you should listen to. We're only NostalgiaCast on Twitter. It'd be wrong to say that as the title of our show.
I think you should also like post about it online a lot so that,
for practice.
Instead of like the 2011 Steam game, Nostalgia, the 2020 podcast.
You really want to climb up those Google Google search
the
charts.
Google search that comes up. Yeah, that would make me very happy.
Maybe we should talk to Google.
Let's talk to Google.
Yeah.
Who is he?
Mr. Google?
Mr. Google.
Tom Google?
He's like a puppet with like googly eyes.
Is that the same Tom from Twitter?
Tom from MySpace?
Oh,
MySpace,
Tom from MySpace.
Yeah.
All right.